Welcome to the Moms Makin Dough podcast. I am your host, Kendra Hewitt. And today's episode, we are going to put the fun in financial checkups or check ins, rather. Whether you're a working mom or a mompreneur, your money goals deserve more than just hope and hustle. So today I'm going to dive in through my quarterly review process, the exact steps I take to track, measure, and reset both my personal and professional financial goals every 90 days. This isn't about spreadsheets, it's not about budgets. This is about taking ownership of the right numbers and creating a game plan that not only excites you but guarantees that you will start moving the needle to gain momentum to in order to achieve them. So I want you to kind of think about today's episode. It's one that I have covered before, I think, but I have a lot more refined this process. So I'm going to break down, even with my example, my personal and my professional money goals, just to kind of give you a real idea of the process. So it's a multi-step process. I think if I had to say it, I think it's 5 steps. And let's get going. So, first off, we have to reflect on the last quarter. And this is our first step. And I also find that sometimes it is the hardest step, especially if you're new to this process, because you might not have the answers that you need to complete the actual data, getting the data. So, what you want to do is start off with what your financial business targets were for the last quarter. So, again, if you're new to this process, you might not have those. But what I encourage you to do if you are new to this process is then maybe you can look past the last 90 days and just start to focus and generate some energy around what were some of the wins that you had. And then I don't like to call them losses. I like to call some of the learnings. When I work with one on one with a client, or even in a small group coaching pod, we always start with like, what was our wins for the month? What was our learnings, not our losses? And a lot of times it is really easy to come up with the learnings, man. Like, say, like, hey, I should have done this differently, or this person left my company, or all of it's easy to come up with the things that did not really go right. And the reason we call them learnings, not losses, is because the things that didn't go right usually have the biggest lessons behind them, I find, not only in our business, but also in our personal financial picture. So just kind of starting thinking about like what were some of our wins versus our learnings. And if you are someone, myself included, where it is easy to focus on the learnings, what we really want to start to look at as what were some of those wins. And I like to start people really small. Just like when I'm working with a business owner, that is, I always think about this example of when I'm working with a business owner who one of the reasons that they're working with me is that they want to pay themselves more. That seems to be a very reoccurring challenge that a lot of entrepreneurs face is like, I'm paying all the bills, I'm paying all my staff, but there's very little left over for me. And one of their metrics they want to really measure and refine is, how do I pay themselves more? Sometimes that is really starting at a very, very small level. So I have clients that I started with even like $100 a week, which especially when you have 6 figures of revenue, but that seems like a big amount, when you don't have that habit or that, momentum behind you. So starting really small with your targets is also a huge thing, and starting small with wins, like, "Hey, I completed 10 episodes of my podcast." Whatever those targets were, what were wins? What can you chalk up as wins to start to get some positive reinforcement of that? Not only are you getting learnings from last quarter, but you also are getting some gains to help you build some momentum. And we don't want to get into the conversation with ourselves of why or why not here. We want to really start to focus on like just starting to, I try to, when I do the quarterly review calls with my clients, we start to go over the wins. we usually aim for 3 wins and then 3 learnings is what we do. I like to say, like, pick 1 per month, when we look at the quarter, but sometimes that doesn't happen that way. Sometimes a lot of us, myself included, are more, what I like to call pressure players. I wish I didn't have that skill set, but I love the little added pressure. Like, we got 1 week left in June as I'm recording this, and I was even reviewing my goals and targets for this, and I was like, "Holy shit, I've hit a lot of these, but I still have a week left to kind of clean up some of the ones that I've started but really haven't completed, and what do I need to do to complete those?" So that's where my mind goes, even as I was organizing on the outline for this episode. So this is where the biggest question too is that once you start to identify those wins and losses, you want to start to look at the real facts, and you want to start to ask yourself what worked, what didn't, and what felt aligned versus what felt focused, and what felt forced, what felt like you were in flow versus what, like I said, felt more like you were going against the grain, of your own, or beating against your own drum. I don't know if that makes any sense, but hopefully it does. And that brings us to the first step is when we're talking about what worked, what didn't, we want to look at our facts first. And this is where I find a lot of women entrepreneurs and working moms really start to kind of shrink back a little bit because they're like, holy shit, I'm not sure I know these numbers and these answers, which is super, super typical, especially when I work with someone one on one. One of my hugest wins from one of my clients, coaching clients, this on this quarterly review process that I started. I usually start them mid month, going towards the end of the quarter because we start outlining this process and going through it so that by their first call of the following month, we have like data to work with so that we can set some real good targets. So when I asked them to pull numbers, what was your revenue generated? What was your overhead? What was your, like, what was your profit? What did you pay yourselves? Did you incur any additional business debt? What's in your vault, your savings account for your business? Same questions could apply for your personal finances. And when I look at these numbers, a lot of times I will have one of the biggest wins, like I said, with one of my clients who had a good pulse on her numbers, but in her mind, she didn't. And one of the biggest wins she had this quarter was realizing that she knew her numbers better than she was giving herself credit for. And now that she was more comfortable with sharing those numbers with me, we can get a lot more strategic. And she was saying how free that made her feel, and actually how much more confident it made her feel to make better buying decisions, to make better hiring decisions. And also, too, like if you're looking at your personal finances, it's also going to make you make better investment decisions or spending decisions. um, and so just really starting to pull the numbers of what you have, the typical numbers that you want to look like when it comes from a business perspective. We look at cash collected. What was your total revenue in? What was your overhead? What was your, these are just very basic. I've done other episodes where I really break down some of the metrics that I use when it comes to business that we measure and we look at every month, but or every week in some cases. But when it comes to your personal finance, it's very similar. It's like, what was my total income? And when it comes to that, I like to say, depending on how you pay yourself, it should be your income, like what actually hit your bank account after taxes. If you're a W 2, if you're not a W 2, that obviously opens up a different can of worms based on how you pay yourself. But that's the big question is like, did you pay yourself? What did you pay yourself if you owned a business? Um, how much did you add any additional debt? Did you decrease debt? Did you increase your vault, your savings account? Maybe it's you were in a place when in your financials where you need to add some additional life insurance. Maybe you had to set up a trust this quarter. Things that are all financially tied that you want to get like some hard numbers to. And you also want to next in the review facts, which is the second step after you reflect on last quarter. You really want to track these financial facts in like a format of some sort, and it does not need to be a budget. Like I am a huge advocate of ditching the budget and creating what I call an alignment plan. So if you're looking at business metrics, like I said, you're looking at leads generated, sales converted, cash collected, overhead. If you're looking at personal, I'm looking at like what was the monthly income? What are some of my spending patterns? Where am I overspending? Where do I need to plan for? Because I'm going to be spending. Maybe it's going to be taking something fun, like taking a vacation. Maybe it's going to be a down payment on a property coming up. Um, and then also, like, what is my debt progress? And this applies to both business and personal. Is like, hey, am I accumulating debt or am I accelerating paying off debt? Am I creating that snowball effect? What are some savings goals? Do I have an emergency fund? Or maybe if you're past the emergency fund and it's time for you to start investing, maybe you're building both at the same time, and that's part of what is in your alignment plan. So these are where I get to pull these real hard facts that sometimes a lot of us don't want to look at, especially when we don't like them. Which brings me to the next part is step 3 is really feeling the feelings of these facts. So I really like to make a clear delineation here so that you can understand is that we all have facts and we all have feelings. A lot of times, us females specifically love to confuse the feelings with the facts, and the men are, I find, are often the opposite, where they can be very comfortable with the facts, but they sometimes struggle to identify the feelings behind them. So when we talk about feeling the feelings, is like what emotions come up when you look at these facts, when you look at these numbers. So I'll give you an example. One that is very commonly talked about, myself included, that I focus on is debt, right? Is my debt, like I said, are debts accumulating? Am I accumulating bad debt or am I accumulating debt that's actually valuable that I'm leveraging, like buying an investment property? Um, so I want to look at those kind of things and see what comes up because a lot of times when debt starts to rise, especially if it is not good debt, leverage debt, like with an asset attached to it, we start to feel shame, guilt, and sometimes avoidance of even looking at the situation. Again, I can totally relate to this because sometimes when I keep running that credit card and not really paying attention to like paying it down, I start to like get very anxious and shameful because there's been times when I've carried a lot of personal debt in my life that I didn't pay off or wasn't able to pay off right away. So, really, this is something that I personally pay attention to a lot, but, like, what are those emotions? And I just recently had this conversation. I'm really on this path right now where in, my personal finance, I'm really starting to have more conversation and bringing my husband more into it on the personal side and our business side because I am the CFO of the practices that we run together, the businesses we run together. And a lot of times I will take care of things without even talking to him about it, which is gonna bring I'm gonna share a little bit of story when I start to talk about, my personal business, and personal and business targets from last quarter. And, so one of the things that I identified this quarter is that I had a lot of shame and guilt about some of the past financial decisions I made on my own, um, to quote, "make him happy," that I should have talked to him about more because instead of making me happy, it actually built resentment and it put a strain in many ways on our marriage. So, if you wanna hear some of that conversation, we also do a podcast together, my husband and I, called The Weaponized Marriage, where I've really started to get a little bit naked in this conversation, as uncomfortable it is, on just managing our business and our personal finances as a couple, and not having a lot of systems in place, and now becoming aware of this and starting to really focus on this, specifically going into this next quarter, now that we've done some digging on the actual facts and started to talk about our feelings behind it, both of us, my husband and I. So there is this is the place where the feelings, you start to really start to look at am I avoiding, which is a very common pattern, Am I running from it? Or am I owning or building awareness about my current financial reality that will put me in the driver's seat of me changing that reality? Which brings us to really the next step, which is going to be vision casting with intention on what you want to create in both your personal and your business finances. So, if we look at the first three steps just in review before we go on to the next two, the first one is going to be reflecting on your last quarter, just like what were those wins? What were those learnings? The second part is going to be reviewing the real facts. So, like starting to get data and metrics so that you can actually make good financial decisions in both your business and your personal life. Next step is going to be feeling the feelings, starting to build awareness around what are the types of feelings that you have. And as if you are a regular listener to this show, one of the things that I always talk about is like Moms Making Dough was designed so that you can learn how to make, manage, multiply, and ultimately maximize your money. And with that said, you cannot do that without a shift in your money mindset. And I talk about this all the time. I'm super passionate about it. And even this quarter, I've got very real and raw with myself on both business and personal on some of the things and areas that I have old wounds. Some of the shifts I know I need to be making. And I'll be completely honest, some of them were really uncomfortable because that means I have to admit that possibly I need to do something differently and or something that there's some level of vulnerability that I don't know it all and I don't have it all together and it isn't perfect, which is the lowest standard there is because it's not attainable. And just the reminder here that we are all a work in progress and many of us avoid, like I said, feeling these feelings because we have negative associations to them rather than positive. And that's part of what shifting your mindset is building awareness around the things that are actually keeping you stuck in your money. So that brings me to the next step, and this is the fun one, right? And this is going to be vision casting and setting your focus maps. And I'm going to talk about the focus maps. But first off, for you to vision cast, you have to reconnect with your 12-month goals. So I do my goals and targets on a 12-month timeline. So I set my targets for my money, both personally and professionally, last year going into the new year. And I then break them down on a quarterly basis. So into what we call focus items. So this is where we start to reverse engineer. I like to call it the 90-day sprint. I look at each year is a series of 4 quarters where there is a 90-day sprint interval. And I called this episode Use Summer to Speed Up instead of slow down because summer is typically a time when you do see a lot of people slow down. And I mean, I'm saying it from a perspective, not a personal level, but more of a from a professional level, business level. And summer I find is a great way for you to build momentum and so I'm going to give you an example of I'm not going to share my 12 months goals on here, but I'm going to share what my last quarterly's goals were for my personal and my professional finances. So personally, first off, it was to set up a cash balance plan and get it in place. Cash balance plan is a retirement vehicle for business owners that I was not really familiar with until recently and there was lots of steps of setup for this. And it's a tax advantage and it's a way to invest and save for the future as a business owner. So that was number one, which I can tell you right now, that is a target I have hit. Number two, I always have 4 targets in each category. Number two was cabin search expanded. So my husband and I have been looking for a short-term rental property that we could also utilize ourselves in Maine, up on a lake. We have been doing this. This has been on our goal list since we got married, which will be 15 years in July. So it's been a long time coming, but this is the first couple years where we got really serious about it. The problem is that we got really serious after COVID when everyone else got really serious and said, "Hey, I can work remote from a lake." And started buying up the main real estate, and now it's become very competitive. So, and the prices have gone with it. So we had to kind of expand our search because we were basically looking for a unicorn. And so we had to start doing that, which tomorrow I'm looking at a couple properties, hoping that one of them will be the answer um, to this 15-year dream and vision. So the third one was a financial meeting rhythm with Ryan. As I mentioned, that was something that we did not have a weekly financial meeting. That personal stuff, business stuff, we have very regularly, but we did not have a rhythm. Partly because when I talk about feel the feelings, there was a lot of shame, guilt, and anger and resentment on my side involved in the money conversation. So, I'm sure there's a lot of people that can relate. That's a story for another day. Like I said, if you want to hear some of us through some of that, you can join us on the Weaponized Marriage podcast. I believe it's called the most powerful symbols of money, sex and of marriage, sex and money. And then the fourth one, it was setting up interest cycle payments for my personal credit cards. So, one of the things I started doing was putting all of my expenses on a credit card. And then what I started setting up was automatic payments interest cycle, because what was happening is that very randomly I would put charges on my card, like groceries, all that kind of stuff. But most of the time I would pay cash. And that was kind of a habit from when I did have a lot of personal debt. But what started to happen was that I was putting stuff on the card, and instead of, I was paying it very haphazardly. Like I would put something on a card, then pay it off the next day. But I didn't like that rhythm, and then some weeks I had to pay more, vice versa. So now what I did is I really paid attention this quarter, like on average, what am I spending? Also brought me a lot of awareness of where I was overspending. And setting up intercycle payments was a way I could automate that. So those were my 4 personal financial targets, which I have met every single one of them, with the exception of the cabin search hasn't resulted in a actual purchase, but that might change tomorrow. Let's manifest that. So, the next one, business ones. First off, on my coaching and consulting business, I have to my number one target was to get my website up, kendrahewitt.com, and set up discovery call schedule. So, with that said, that will be launching latest Friday, most likely. I should say latest Monday by Friday of this week. So, I'm going to hit that target. Number 2 was adjust my pricing and my schedule for summer. So I increased my prices on my one-on-one clients, and I decreased the number of one-on-one spots I had available, because I did not want to be stuck behind Zoom on a beautiful day, even though it's 100 degrees here in Massachusetts, which is very rare. Um, and I'm fine with sitting here behind the screen. The next one was marketing for my group. I'm going to be running a group. Haven't done a group pod in a while. I'm going to do 2 groups, and that was my fourth target. It was to fill 2 groups for my July 10th summer school program. So this is a program I'm running. I do have 2 slots open, of those 10 slots available for 2 groups of 5 women entrepreneurs. They almost all of them are 6 plus figure revenue businesses, all different types of businesses, but, several of them are one-on-one clients that I wanted to see the power of the group, and also, like I said, take them off my one-on-one schedule, put them into a group format. So instead of doing 3 or 4 one-on-one calls per week, I would do, I would put them into a group where I coach 1 hour a week, and they work together in pods on what their homework is. Obviously, I'm really involved. The group for me, I absolutely love the group. For example, I was with my coach yesterday and we did, I'm in a small group, and she did hot seats. And probably one of my favorite things to do, where we went through like any business challenge we were having or something we were working on, and we had an opportunity to ask her for our specific help in that within the group. What was amazing is that as everyone shares, you start to take ideas and concepts away from the other people that are sharing. And it's just such a reminder of that there's synergy in a group that you don't get on the one-on-one. That was my big thing was create the marketing. Number 3 was create the marketing for summer school. And number 4 was, launch my group for Q3 launch of July 10th and fill 10 slots, into 2 groups, so 5 in each group. And then when it comes to the practice, like I said, I'm the CFO of our practice. So for me, I still set targets that I have to put in place that I'm responsible for. Some of them do become human resource, which I still manage. But these were my ones. And again, like I said, a couple of them I had in play, but then I didn't hit them. So, yet, and I still have through Monday, June 30th before this launches. Uniforms ordered. So one of my things that I've been trying to do with staff is that just get like a cool uniform, just a shirt with a logo made. We have been through like 3 or 4 companies. I finally decided on company and I just got the order in. So that is off the list. Which brings me to number 2, which was we need to redo a photo shoot and headshots of a lot of our team. And this was something I had scheduled and then we ended up canceling. And I'm good for good reason because now that brings me to the third one was we are purchasing a new piece of equipment for us to be able to add an additional offer that we're going to be implementing in Q3 into our services. And also requires me to do some build out and some construction in our office. So I rescheduled the photo shoot because I want to be able to capture that with that done. So even though those were my targets, this is what happens when you have business or personal targets that you have on your list from last quarter. However, they have not been completed. So they just kind of move to the next quarter. And I like to say they either move or get refined. Sometimes I look at them and I'm like, you know what? I set that as a target, but it actually doesn't apply anymore. So I can eliminate it. Other times I put it on that list and I say, okay, this one still needs to be done. So the photo shoot will move to the next quarter. Um, because one, I haven't received the uniforms yet with the logos on them. And then two is that a photographer's availability was a challenge. And then the third thing was, like I said, pending on this build out and this equipment purchase in terms of the time that we would get that completed, which will be a Q3 initiative. And, then the final one was once we have this piece of equipment ordered, creating a marketing plan with Ryan, my husband, on how we're gonna integrate this, and maximize it and pay off the investment of purchasing that machine. So those were the top 4 in my business and personal. So like I said, I kinda treat both businesses. Um, I actually have another business with my husband, which has a whole other set of targets. But for the sake of time, I'm not gonna go through those. I just thought it would be really helpful if you could kinda hear me work through my previous quarter's, targets and have me look at like, "Hey, did I hit these focus items?" Because now, like I said, vision casting I really want to look at, okay, I set my 12-month targets back in January. Now we're at halftime. And I want to say, like, hey, am I close to hitting those 12-month targets? Because now is the perfect time for me to make adjustments to do so in both my personal and my professional finances. So I want to look at this creating this 90-day sprint. So if these were mine from last quarter, now what I need to do that sprint is look at the 12 months. So vision cast what I said I wanted to have become my reality by the last 12 months. And now I want to ask myself a little bit more of a more strategic question of what do I want my reality to look like if I know I'm going to that 12-month target. So January 2026, as scary as that sounds, it's around the corner. What do I need to do this quarter, Q3, to set as focus items for me to reverse engineer the plan of what it would take for me to get closer to that 12-month target? So I want to prioritize. I always circle. Remember, I said I do 4 per quarter. I mean per category, but I really want to prioritize that first one. That one that I know would make the biggest needle, would move the needle the most in the right direction towards that 12-month target. And let me be clear too. Sometimes when you have a 12-month target, you might hit them before the end of the year, which is fucking awesome if you do that. But other times you will like have it will might be a goal that might be pushed into the new year. Your goal at this halfway mark is to really reassess, look at your 12-month targets and say, like, is this really what I still want at the halfway mark before you start to work on Q3 targets. So the net last and final step is once you've looked at that 12-month target list, you're going to reverse engineer your personal and professional financial targets because this is where you break them into the quarterly chunks. Um, and I'll give you an example. On personal, it might be a actual income target. Like you might be like, I want to have, I want to do $10,000 in bonus money. Now that bonus money might be 10,000 in sales and that you're gonna get, but you might not get that till Q4. But maybe your 12-month goal was a $40,000 bonus this year. So you might have broken it up into its 10,000 per quarter that you wanted to do. But here's a caveat. This is where reflecting is huge as the first step. You might have that 40,000 bonus goal in your personal income. With that said, or maybe it's a $40,000 dividend check you can write to yourself as the business owner. What you might do is you might pay that quarterly instead of at the end of the year. Some of people don't get paid that way or don't pay themselves that way. So the reason I bring this up is that I would want to look at the previous 2 quarters. If my goal was 40,000, in the first quarter I made 8,000, so I missed the mark on the 10K. But then let's say I made up for it in this quarter and I hit that 12K. So I'm right on track with that 12-month goal. Then I want to either be more aggressive on this goal for the Q3, or maybe I'm going to lighten it up knowing that Q4 is usually a better time in whatever type of business I have for me to make money. For example, let's say you have a more seasonal type business. Maybe you have a retail product and like Christmas time is when you have your biggest months. So I might be okay with setting a smaller target for Q3 that's more realistic, that's in terms of what your business does. Then I might be in terms of my personal stuff. So, your target incomes, let's just get a rhythm. But that might be a really good personal financial goal. I don't set one of those myself, but I set revenue targets specifically with Ryan and also for my own coaching and consulting. So for example, the 5 people in the 2 groups I talked about as my goal, that was a Q2 target. Now, I will not see that revenue come in because a lot of people will not pay until right before that program or if they chose a payment plan. But that's another $10,000 in revenue for me. So, and if I hit the target of the 10 people, it's actually going to be $20,000 in revenue over the summer. So, and like I said, that's with me working people through what's going to become my digital course. So that's what I'm doing because my big 12-month goal is to do a full launch in the fall of my digital course, which is coming out for women entrepreneurs. So, Summer School, my program I'm running this summer, is getting people through all of the modules that will actually live in my digital course, which they will have a lifetime access to, but they will only get me for the group coaching when they join this small group. So, just thinking about that, like, just that's where the reverse engineering comes in is that I know that my big business goal for my coaching and consulting is to complete the course and do a launch. And in Q4, I will set, when that's realistic, I will set like financial targets specifically for the launch. Right now, I'm not going to set that because that doesn't make sense because I'm just in creation and actually like processing of like the people that are going to be in summer school. One of the things that they get the discounted rate on is because I asked them to give me a testimonial because I need those for when I go do the launch. So that was a really good reverse engineering goal of this quarter for me. So what I strongly encourage you to do is to take just a block out a period of time, whether it's better for you on the week or better for you on the weekend. Communicate with your significant other or anybody that needs to know. Just be like, listen, I need to, work. I like to block when I do my targets, I do a 4-hour block. And I know that sounds really long, but I get really detailed but it takes me more time because I do have, like I said, multiple businesses that I'm setting targets for, and I set targets for each one of them. So in addition to my personal finances. And then I also do them in 3 other categories. I do them in my health, I do them in my what I call body. I do them in my being, which is my spirituality, my connection with God, my connection with myself. And then I also set them in from the balance category, which is my relationship with my husband, my relationship with my daughter, my relationship with my immediate family, like my mom, my brother, my aunt, people that I really want to be very intentional with how I use my time and what I want the outcomes to be. So that process does take me that long. I can tell you 100% if you are doing just your personal, you can do this exercise in 60 minutes or less. If you are doing your business, or multiple businesses like I am, like I said, that's probably about on a good day, 90 minutes to a 2-hour block. Um, that's what it takes for me just to kind of plug in, drop in, and get into that productive and creative mode and also build some momentum by starting off with what were some of my wins and identifying some of my learnings, but not getting stuck on what those learnings were. So I hope you found this really, really helpful. I am very excited to hear if you do this exercise, please, please, please DM me and let me know what your experience was. I will also link up in the show notes on this episode the template I use that I gave to clients on collecting your wins, your learnings, and also setting those targets. In terms of the reverse engineering process of the facts, what I call the facts, reviewing the facts, feeling the feelings, vision casting off of your 12-month timeline, and then reverse engineering your focus items. So, but the remembering that the steps are it starts with the reflection of looking at the wins and the learnings. So I hope you found this episode super helpful. I'm very excited for us to be at halftime and for you to be having listening to this show. And if you have found that this show is helpful, please, please, please help me get the word out by sharing it with other moms and working moms and female entrepreneurs who are looking to make more and work less by doing so. So that you can do the things that you really want to do with your time instead of just feeling like like I said at the beginning, you have more hope and hustle than actually like time that you really want to be spending because that is one currency that none of us can get back. So use it wisely. And as always, please rate, review, and subscribe. And I look forward to having you next time on Moms Making Dough.